Welcome to The More Perfect Union, a podcast about the joy we get from American politics, or as we like to call it, real debate without the hate. Hello, I'm Kevin Kelton, a moderate Democrat from Los Angeles, California.
I'm DJ McGuire, your Republican in exile from Suffolk, Virginia.
I'm Rebecca Kushmiter, your liberal Democrat in Kensington, Maryland.
I'm Cliff Dunn, your Republican not in exile from Newport News, Virginia.
And I'm Helena Henry, your evangelical conservative from Colleyville, Texas.
The More Perfect Union podcast can be heard on iTunes, on Facebook, and at our website, moreperfectunionpodcast.com, where you can also take our SurveyMonkey poll and tell us what you like or don't like about the podcast. Well, everybody, we had a really fascinating week in history this week, starting with the identity crisis that the Republican Party seems to be going through, that I think we saw front and center at the CPAC conference. Anybody want to take a stab at what they saw there or what they thought of it?
Well, for those who don't know, CPAC stands for Conservative Political Action Conference or Committee?
Conference.
It's a conference.
Conference, and it's an annual event where conservatives from around the country gather near D.C. They're not in D.C. anymore, and listen to speeches and have panels. And it's always kind of almost like the Oscars of republicanism. You know, you get some real big headliners. No red carpet, though. You know, they don't ask Mike Huckabee who he's wearing, which is kind of a shame. They should get Seacrest out there, really work the crowd. But, this year, Mike Pence and Donald Trump both spoke. That was a pretty big deal. Steve Bannon and Reince Priebus. Reince. So I will learn this someday. I will. They did a big panel on the main stage, but the headliner was supposed to be our good friend Milo Yiannopoulos. Only somebody outed him as being pro-pederasty. And so he was promptly disinvited. He also then lost his book deal and then resigned as an editor of Breitbart. So he had a bad week.
Let's stay on what we saw at CPAC. Betsy DeVos was there. Steve Bannon spoke. Reince Priebus spoke with Bannon, putting on a very happy front for the audience.
Although I saw a clip where Reince smacked Steve Bannon's hand off of him. Like Bannon
yes,
was reaching over like he
did. I remember that.
Reince's attention, and Priebus just whacked his hand down.
Yeah,
the
it
way
looked like Bannon actually wanted to hold hands with him. Maybe he wanted to do like a victory thing.
Yeah, I don't know what he was trying to do, but like it really looked like he was swatting a puppy.
Yeah.
Not that I advocate puppy swatting. Don't come after me, PETA.
So let me ask the conservatives, what was your takeaway? Obviously, it seemed like a very successful conference.
I'm going to ask Cliff and Helena, have either of you actually been at a CPAC conference?
No, I have not.
I have not. Okay.
I actually have. I was at the 2004 CPAC conference. It's essentially a sci-fi convention for conservatives. Usually folks are there for the panels. It's there for networking. Folks are trying to sell their books. Oh, no, wait, that was just me. It's a lot more transactional, I think, than people realize, for what it's worth. And that's kind of the air and the atmosphere. To answer the question, it really saddened me because it basically shows the Trump administration has put its stamp not just on what the Republican Party is, but what the conservative movement is. And it is defining it in a way that, frankly, does not make me comfortable.
I would agree with that. And I think that CPAC is started to disprove a theory that I have held for quite some time. The theory is that the Republican Party recognizes that Trump is like an inoperable tumor, and they have to live with him while he's in the body. But the second that it becomes operable, they'll excise the tumor and they'll move on, right? And that's really the best path forward when you think about it for the party. They can avoid alienating Trump supporters while also washing themselves and cleansing themselves of the stink, for lack of a better word, of Trump. But as DJ notes, I think CPAC shows the extent to which the party is becoming inextricably intertwined with Trump. And to answer your question in terms of, how did it go? I know Milo Yiannopoulos is a separate topic, but I think that's really wrapped up in how it went, which is terribly, right? Because the main conversation out of CPAC is him. And he is now gone from a sideline, circus sideshow internet troll to part of the main conversation that is associated with CPAC.
You see, that's interesting because as a liberal, I thought that the conservatives had a pretty good conference. I thought they came out seeming aligned, seeming enthusiastically behind Trump, seeming to adopt most of the same positions on the issues. I didn't see where the disconnect was.
But here's the problem. What you see as the coordination and the consolidation of Trumpism within the Republican Party and the conservative movement, those are the very things that get Helena and I so upset. And those are the very things that get Helena and me so uncomfortable about the Republican Party. And for me, now it's uncomfortable about the conservative movement as a whole. If the conservative movement is now unified behind Donald Trump and everything he does, I can't even call myself a conservative anymore.
No, I get that, but most Republicans seem very comfortable with the fact that their party has been co-opted by Donald Trump. I know that you and Helena don't, but most conservatives. Cliff, can I put you on the spot? How do you feel about this?
I am generally pleased. We'll set the situation with Milo aside, or Milo, or however we say his name, and hopefully we don't have to say it too many more times. But my understanding, for what it's worth, is that even before the whole PETA whatever thing popped out, there was a great deal of consternation that CPAC had basically pulled him in at the last minute without consulting with their previous speakers. And there were a lot of elected officials who were really nervous about sharing a stage with him. And so, from what I understand from some friends in D.C., there was almost a concerted effort to find a reason to disinvite him.
As an observer of CPAC, again, I've never attended, but it always does seem like they're bringing out the name of the moment. I mean, I remember Sarah Palin standing at a podium with a big gulp to complain about Bloomberg trying to limit the size of sodas. I mean, you see a parade of presidential wannabes every couple of years there. There is a certain element of pep rally to it.
Yeah, I mean, and one other thing I would say, if I may, is that while there's very clearly a feeling of unity projected there, I have to legitimately ask how long it's going to last, simply because everybody's rolling with you're mentioning the pep rally aspect with the newly elected president. Nobody wants to mess up the rug.
And I think the unity is superficial. I don't think it's real. And you can tell this just by looking at what's happening within the religious right. So you have people like James Dobson, a Focus on the Family, these really established Christian thinkers and figures in the movement who have completely aligned themselves with Trump and serve on his evangelical advisory board. And then you have people like Russell Moore, who is the head of the Ethics and Religious Liberties Commission, which is a policy arm of the Southern Baptist Convention. And Russell Moore has been vehemently anti-Trump, has been very vocal about it in op-eds both during the election and after, and now has also written an amicus curiae brief in support of a New Jersey mosque. And the religious right has just erupted. You're seeing real factions within the group. There are churches that are withholding money within the Southern Baptist Convention because of what Russell Moore has done. And people are very divided. And there are other people along with Russell Moore who have taken an anti-Trump approach, like Albert Mohler and Tim Keller and others. So I think that what we're seeing at CPAC is that the shiny, happy North Korea-esque, parade, right, that hides the ills that are happening underneath.
Well, you make it sound almost like it was a political convention.
Good point. Because speaking of happy, shiny conferences where people are pretending to be in unity, the Democrats also had an event this week. They had their vote for the new DNC chair, which Tom Perez won, but it was very contentious, with Keith Ellison coming in close on the first vote and then losing on the second vote. And then Tom Perez named him the deputy chair, or at least floated that in front of the group there, and they voted unanimously to affirm that. Well, I'll turn to you, Rebecca. What did you think of that?
I look at the DNC, and their job is to make sure that we've got bodies in races that need bodies, and they raise money. It's not a policy organization. They're not determining the platform. They are an operating structure for winning elections. And I had my hesitations about Ellison doing the job simply because I was not impressed with watching Debbie Wasserman Schultz try and split her time between being a sitting member of Congress and running the DNC. It doesn't seem like you can pay enough attention to either.
He had vowed that he was going to step down from his House of Representatives seat if he had won. Now he's a deputy chair, so that won't be necessary.
Right, but I wasn't certain that was going to happen. I promises have only so much weight.
That's true.
When made in times of contention. So I mean, I'm perfectly satisfied with how it turned out, and I'm seeing a lot of this Bernie bro-esque. Well, I'm leaving the Dem Party because Keith Ellison didn't win. I'm like, well, okay, that's completely ridiculous. I don't know what your problem is. If and I'd put more weight in people's objections if I thought they could name even two of the past three immediate past DNC chairs. I feel like this got some unwarranted attention because there were people who are still having sour grapes over the primaries.
And also over Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Yeah, well, she sucked at her job and she had to step down.
It happens. But the Sanders wing of the party is putting up a stink. A lot of people are saying that Ellison should have been elected, that Tom Perez is a warmed-over Obama-Clinton sycophant. Apparently, Bernie Sanders has refused to share his email list with the party, so he claims to be trying to move the Democratic Party forward, yet he's keeping his own little movement separate from the Democrats. I think Bernie is running in 2020. I think he's the leading candidate at this point. He's the front runner.
Put on my Greg Matuzak hat here and just, Bernie's being a jerk. He's trying to hold the party hostage. I mean, the guy he was allowed onto the platform committee. He was not a Democrat prior to 2015. So, the way he wants to come in and try and run the show now that he's had 15 months as a member of the party is absurd. It'd be like me walking in and trying to run the PTA if I had never shown up to a meeting before. I'm not impressed with him. I feel like he's just trying to draw out his moment, and I wish someone would give him a freaking book contract so he could get rich and shut up for a while.
Yeah.
Oh, but that wouldn't be socialist of him.
I know most of what Bernie does. So
we had a socialist dog on the track for a few seconds there. Sorry about that.
That dog was cheering me on. That dog was my fan club.
Yeah. But one thing I will say, for what it's worth, is that with insurgent campaigns, and I think back to Ron Paul, not Rand, but Ron, there is a tendency to distrust the party leadership with their data. And actually, this showed up back in the day with the Perot campaign. And I will say, for what it's worth, that I suspect that had Donald Trump not won the nomination, we would be having this discussion about Donald Trump refusing to share his list. So there is a standing pattern of insurgent campaigns which don't want to share their stuff with the party leadership and play ball normally.
But is this the Democratic Party doing again to itself what it did in 2016? Factionalizing, turning on each other, eating its young. I mean, Bernie Sanders is the de facto front runner for 2020. If he stays healthy and if he chooses to run...
What?
He is the de facto front runner for 2020. Elizabeth Warren may give him a run for her money, and she may indeed get the nomination. But maybe somebody that's got a little bit, Cory Booker,
Tammy Duckworth,
maybe Tammy Duckworth.
O'Malley.
Martin O'Malley is not coming back. Maybe
No,
Al
not
Franken.
Martin O'Malley. No.
Maybe
No.
Andrew Cuomo. But the fact of the matter is, Bernie Sanders is, like it or not, the de facto front runner. And I don't know.
Bernie. I'm sorry, but Bernie Sanders is right now more worried about his reelection in 2018 than about 2020. While Donald Trump was getting pasted in Vermont, the Republican won the race for governor in Vermont that year for the first time since before Howard Dean took the office.
DJ,
so
you and I haven't come to verbal blows in a while, but. Do you really believe?
I know we're overdue, damn it. We're overdue.
Do you really believe that Bernie Sanders is in any danger of losing that seat? Do you really believe that?
I think Bernie Sanders believes that the more he rubs the Democratic Party the wrong way, the safer he is in 2018.
Okay.
And yes, I do think that is something of a concern to him.
Okay.
Not a big concern, mind you, but enough where he knows he has to make sure that that he can say the Democrats don't really like me either.
The only way he could lose is if Tom and or Jerry decided to run in Vermont.
Yeah.
And as for 2020, I'm sorry, but the only reason Bernie Sanders did as well as he did was because no one else was willing to run, was willing to run and stick it out until the end against Hillary Clinton. And there's nothing against Mrs. Clinton, mind you, but it's the fact that people wanted to vote against a front runner. They wanted a chance to say, we've had it with these people, we want to register a protest, and Bernie Sanders was the vehicle of that protest.
I agree.
In 2020, when the notion of, okay, we are actually we want to choose a credible alternative to Donald Trump, the notion that Bernie Sanders would be the first choice among Democrats, from my perspective, is utterly laughable. Jim Webb will get the Democratic nomination before Bernie Sanders does in 2020.
Well,
I would vote for Jim Webb before I would vote for Bernie Sanders,
No.
let me tell
Okay.
you.
Okay, well, it's 2 against 1, but I respectfully disagree. First of all, Jim Webb is... I know you're picking a name out of the hat, but he's a non-entity in the Democratic
How
Party.
about Joe Manchin?
No. The Democratic Party, again, I know you guys...
Maybe a bit of a struggle
Yeah.
for Joe Manchin.
I'm enjoying the humor here. It's all cool. But I got to tell you, Bernie Sanders has his 40% of the Democratic Party in his pocket. All he has to do is add another 8% if he gets the nomination.
No, he doesn't. Though they are not in his pocket. No,
Some of them weren't registered Democrats, and these are people who didn't understand how primaries work. I wasn't, yes, he had a wave and he had a certain segment of support, but honestly, I just don't know how sustainable all of the Bernie mentor is.
The feeling I get is that you had, you had 15 or 20% that were voting for Bernie. You then had another 20 to 25 that were voting against Hillary and were looking to blow a raspberry, and he doesn't have them in his pocket. Nobody has them in their pocket.
Okay, well, time will tell. Time will tell. So let's move on to other subjects. There was so much happening this week. The DHS on immigration following up on the executive order that has been ruled unconstitutional, and yet they're still acting on it.
The White House is working on a rewrite as we speak.
But
and
why
I think...
in the meantime, why is the Immigration and Naturalization Service, or ICE, or whoever it is, why are they stopping all of these people when they don't have a valid executive action to even work on?
Because the bureaucrats have been told, and this happens in every administration, they have been told, yes, you must follow the law. But if you get confused as to what the law means, err on the side of this.
Err on the side of Nazism.
In the Obama administration, it was err on the side of stepping back, letting them live their lives, and waiting until they did something really egregious to go after them.
And what about in the Trump administration? How do you think they're going to handle it?
Anybody who you think might even be close to an immigrant who is not supposed to be here, throw them in a room and interrogate them for a while. And
like Muhammad Ali's son this weekend.
And throw them in the interrogation room and let the lawyers sort it out.
But let's keep in mind that the travel ban and the ban that was and the order that was the subject of the Ninth Circuit ruling is separate from the type of agency action we're seeing where people are, going to someone's home at 4:00 in the morning and trying to get them on their way out the door. So that's the answer to the question as to why is that action still happening, right? Why are there people from Mexico or other countries who are being stopped by ICE officers when the ban has the status it does in the Ninth Circuit? DHS, as we know, recently informed the administration that the ban does not accomplish what the administration says it accomplishes. They identified something like 26 countries that were the source of where terrorists were coming from, and the 7 didn't really overlap with that. And the other notable thing here is we have states now that have joined the administration and tried to offer support. Ken Paxton from the great state of Texas recently indicated that Texas would support the ban. And he raises an argument that stems from this obscure case called Youngstown that talks about what sort of authority the executive has when Congress has or hasn't given a statute. So that's why the ban isn't we're still seeing activity happen, even though the ban is where it is at the Ninth Circuit.
Yeah, one thing to bear in mind is that this is grabbing a lot of headlines because the guidance under Obama was that unless certain boxes are checked, the people are supposed to, quote unquote, not be a priority for deportation proceedings, which basically meant pretend they're here legally, look the other way. And the guidance, as noted, has been reversed. There was one article, I think it was in the Washington Post, where you had the ICE guy saying, we actually feel free to, if somebody pops on the radar, to pick them up and take them in, whereas under Obama, we'd be hit for insubordination.
Okay, so moving on brings me to the topic of the media, which, of course, has been in the news every single day of the last 5 weeks of the Trump administration, because Trump has obviously declared war on the news media. He calls it fake news. He stopped 5 or 7 news outlets from being in what used to be an open press gaggle at the White House this past week, including CNN, the New York Times, the BBC, Politico, the LA Times, and a couple of other venerable names. Where is this going? I mean, first of all, let me just preface this by saying I consider us the media. Granted, we're not Rush Limbaugh, we're not CNN, we're not the New York Times.
And thank God we're not Rush Limbaugh.
Well, I would be happy with his listener base, but we do have we do a podcast, which is a form of media. We have a dedicated listener base.
And thank you to our listeners for that.
Thank you to our listeners. Take our survey at moreperfectunionpodcast.com and let us know what you think of us. There's a little plug. But no, I take it personally. If he has declared war on the media, I feel he has declared war on us and on me. And I'm going to fight back. But I'd like to hear from you guys and gals what you think of where we are with this.
What happened was Sean Spicer decided, I think on Friday, that he didn't want to do a full press briefing in the press room with cameras. Instead, he wanted to do something more informal in his office. And news outlets were told to put their name on a list if they were interested in doing it. And a whole bunch did, because why wouldn't you be interested? And then when the moment came and they showed up for what they call the gaggle, it was like a yes, no, 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 yes, no, 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 yes. DJ, are you singing along with me? What's going on here? And he, shut some outlets out, and particularly the ones that have been named in Donald Trump tweets, and let others like Breitbart and some of the more conservative ones in. And the AP and somebody else walked out in solidarity. And the White House Correspondents Association is issuing sternly worded statements now, and I think everyone's kind of sitting around going, all right, what the hell are we going to do about this? It's pretty unprecedented, not to be confused with unprecedented. Yes, obviously all administrations have played favorites. You hand a network a plum with an exclusive interview with the president, and there are only a few of those to go around. But this is, I don't know, this is a different thing. It has a different flavor to it, and it's uncomfortable.
The flavor is dog.
The worst lollipop flavor ever.
Yeah. A couple things. In defense of the Wall Street Journal, they didn't walk out in solidarity because they weren't aware that there were certain organizations like the New York Times and CNN that have been excluded. But in terms of what's happening here, we have a man who is obsessed, absolutely obsessed with coverage of himself. I've seen some reports that he has stacks and stacks of magazines and other sorts of media that just chronicles, his rise to the presidency. And it's a level of narcissism, that is really unprecedented and something I don't think the American press knows how to deal with in a president.
I want to jump in here and say, I think the press is under attack. I think the press is capable of standing up for itself. But because the lens is now on the media itself, the press is going to have to step up and put on their A game. They are going to have to be more careful with their sources. They're going to have to be more accurate in their reporting. And one of the things that has bugged me, and I know it's bugged everyone here because it bugs every human being that's been watching cable news for the last 3 years, this thing about breaking news that every cable station does, they have to get beyond that because they are ruining their reputation as serious journalists when they are running breaking news every minute of the day, 24/7. And I'm sure you guys could come up with some other good examples of this. But the press now has to step up its game because it's under attack. And frankly, when the press is under attack, democracy is under attack. And this is too big a risk to the country to continue on the same, ratings-based crap that the press has been doing for the last few years, which, by the way, got Donald Trump elected.
Did you see the new motto under the Washington Post's masthead?
I have seen that. Democracy dies in darkness.
Democracy dies in darkness.
First thing I would say is what I think we are actually seeing is the back end of a longer trend toward, there have been the long-running accusations of bias in the media, and now we have a president who's actually acting on, those feelings of bias in a tangible way, and it's not pretty to most of us. Kevin, I will agree with you that breaking news broke the media after a fashion. I'm thinking back to sometime last year where Trump was supposed to speak. He was held up, getting to the event, as tends to happen with these campaign rallies. And so CNN, instead of reporting on anything else, had the camera on the empty podium for an hour.
Or on the plane. Or on the Trump plane, sitting on the tarmac. Yep.
I wonder to what extent some of this is fueled by the attention, positive or negative, that Trump gets from antagonizing the media, right? So if we know that he's obsessed with coverage of himself, he may not fully appreciate yet that he doesn't have to get into some feud with the quote-unquote failing New York Times to be on the front page of everything. And if you look at things like the Mar-a-Lago spectacle when Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was in town, and pictures ending up on Facebook of people handling, what could have been a major international crisis, right? Trump handled the North Korea incident with the same care and concern that you would expect him to handle like Beyonce's pregnancy pictures with. And I think that was intentional, right? I don't think there was an entire apparatus of people who didn't appreciate how to handle like a national security issue. I think the desire for attention, the desire to be seen doing presidential things and being on the main stage is all encompassing, and it overwhelms him. And I think the feud with the media comes from that.
And I would say two things here. I would say two things. One, to Rebecca, the simple fact of the matter is, I don't think a single millennial listening to this podcast actually knows who Madeline Kahn is. And that's a painful reality that we must accept.
That is a painful reality.
As Generation X. The second thing is, Lyndon Johnson in 1964 declared a war on poverty. Richard Nixon and George W. Bush both declared a war on drugs. Now Donald Trump has declared a war on media, including this podcast. I like our chances.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
But something to note, we talk about the media, and we do talk about the mainstream media, and and the CNN being able to have a camera on the Malaysia Airlines flight or the podium at Mar-a-Lago. But the media is huge. I mean, it is so far beyond what it was in times past that. This war is not something an individual executive like Trump can win. It's us. And what's he going to do? Send jackboot of thugs to collect the five of us and our computers and cut off our Skype connection?
Hey, don't give him any ideas, Rebecca. Don't give him any ideas.
And something that's making this even more complicated is the development of what could eventually become a deep state within the intelligence communities and the leaks that you're looking at. And I think Trump it behoove him to appreciate that the media is not just, Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski on Morning Joe. There's connections and relationships that the media has within the executive branch that are a lot deeper than the relationships that Trump has.
Wait, the media is not just Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski?
And us.
Regarding the intelligence community, the simple, it took a while for Hitler to figure out that the Abwehr was actually working against him. Trump has figured that out a lot sooner. But the notion of the intelligence community leading the resistance, from my perspective, is actually kind of cool. Maybe I'm just weird that way.
Yeah, first of all,
I think the first week of the administration gave us that clue.
First of all, I do think the Hitler analogies are getting a little bit overdone and tired at this point. That may just be me.
I'm not tired of them. I'm not tired of them.
I really have a hard time with the Hitler analogies, and I'll make some enemies here, and that's fine. I appreciate very much so, and I'll be the first to say that what Trump has done and the things that he says in his rhetoric is unprecedented, it's unacceptable, it's abhorrent. But as the granddaughter of an Orthodox Jew from Poland, to analogize Trump's words to, the murder of 6 million Jews is something that I think is problematic and minimizes or fails to fully appreciate the plight of those people. So
I co-sign your statement on this entirely, and I'm also of Jewish descent, and it's the same thing.
I'm going to be the naysayer here, ladies and gentlemen. Adolf Hitler came to power in 1933. Kristallnacht did not happen until 1939. Okay, let's give Trump a running start here. Okay.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh.
No, I want to be...
Giving him a running start just sounds
I'm picturing
so
his hair
strange.
blowing in the wind.
The point is that you're right. The result, the outcome of Nazism is probably not going to be parallel to the outcome of the Trump administration. I grant you that. But the analogy is not about the outcome. The analogy is about the methods. And I wish that conservatives would stop focusing on the outcome of Nazism, because the point that liberals are making is that the Trump administration has adopted the same methods.
I've still got a big problem here. The analogy is sufficiently over the top that, frankly, it undermines your case when something big actually happens.
You didn't listen to my words.
Because
it's not about the outcome. It's about the method.
Of what that actually
because
means.
You're focusing on the outcome. You're focusing on 6 million Jews killed and an international world war. And I'm focusing on the methods, propaganda, using a police state, using the Hitler Youth.
But if
this
we don't
all
actually...
happened between 1933 and 1938.
There's no Hitler Youth analogy here, bud.
No.
If we don't think...
Kevin, that's honestly a bridge too far. Unless Capitol Hill suddenly gets destroyed in a fire, and I'm not saying that won't happen, but until it happens, then it's clear that Trump is not using a method that Hitler himself used with the Reichstag fire. I agree with you that we need to be mindful, we need to be vigilant, and that this is an administration that could head into authoritarian, and if it's not careful, even totalitarian ends and methods. But I'm not entirely sure they are following the Nazi playbook step by step. I think they are more following the Mussolini.
But again, when you become literal about it, you lose the whole point.
I need to finish. I think they are following more the Mussolini playbook, which has its own problems, and we need to address that. That's not necessarily better in the long run. But I think we do need to be careful. Trump is not following all of Hitler's methods. There are numerous things that Hitler did, that Hitler had the power to do, that Trump does not have the power to do. Trump is dangerous? Yes. There is a risk? Yes. We have to be vigilant? Yes. We are in 1933 Nazi Germany? No, I'm not willing to go there just yet.
Okay. And I think there's a way to be cognizant of history and to be mindful of parallels and warning signs without being intellectually dishonest, right? We can point out propaganda and troublesome things that Trump has done, but if we really don't believe that the outcome here is going to be the death of 6 million people, then let's not analogize it, right?
No, because it's intellectually
I'm
sorry, I'm standing my ground here. You're all mistaken. You're all mistaken because you're focusing on outcome and not method.
I mean, the other thing. No.
But the methodology is not exclusive to Hitler.
That's right.
I mean, the methodology of authoritarianism can be spread out over any number of dictators over the course of history.
Hitler, Konrad Adenauer, the Spiegel scandal, the piles of D notices and so forth in Britain in the 70s and 80s surrounding the IRA. You can rattle on and on about, quote unquote, mishandling of the media in Western democracies.
Well, Cliff, hang on. There are a lot of analogies we can use for Donald Trump. Harold Wilson just ain't one of them, pal. Come on now.
Okay.
I mean, let's just take a step back here. Harold Wilson? No, that's not it. Okay, you can disagree with my Mussolini angle, which I think makes more sense than the Hitler angle. You and I are on the same page that the Hitler angle doesn't quite work. But no, Harold Wilson? No, sorry, that doesn't work.
Okay.
Sorry.
And finally, speaking of Nazi organizations, let's talk about the White House Correspondents' Dinner. But as everybody knows, well, that was just a lighthearted way to make a segue. But as everybody knows, Donald Trump has announced through Twitter that he will not be attending the White House Correspondents' Dinner this year, the first time since Ronald Reagan missed it 40 some odd years ago when he had somewhat of a good reason not
he was recovering from being shot.
He was recovering from being almost assassinated. But Donald Trump decided that he does not need to suffer the slings and arrows of the whoever's going to be hosting this year.
Outrageous press.
But is Trump getting into, and again, I hate to say it because you guys are going to jump on me, a bunker mentality where he has forsaken the Oscars, which are happening as we speak. He decided to have his governor's ball at the same time and claims that he's not going to be watching the Oscars, although we know he'll be tweeting about them tonight. He's pulled himself out of the White House Correspondents' Dinner because he doesn't want to be, made fun of by some comedians there. But the feeling is that this man is closing in, is pulling back, is building walls around himself, and is this sustainable?
Let me defend him for a moment. The type of environment that Obama faced, where he gets poked fun at, and even Bush, where he got poked fun at a little bit harder, is not what Trump is going to face, and Trump knows that, right? The environment that he will face is one that is hostile, and if it were me, I would bunker down. I don't want to subject myself to having my feelings hurt, regardless of how thick or thin my skin is. I mean, I understand the impulse, I'll say.
Well, here's something interesting about Trump that I noted. There was, I think it was Maggie Haberman of the Post tweeted last night, Trump motorcade leaving the White House, no indication to the press pool where Trump is going. And my first thought was he's going to his hotel. I mean, it's not like he was going to the Kennedy Center. He wasn't Bill Clinton, who was going to, stop at McDonald's. He wasn't Barack Obama, who was going to go to Ben's Chili Bowl. The only place in town that he could just kind of spontaneously go is his own hotel. He doesn't have a universe here in the city. He's not a welcome addition to the Washington pantheon. So yes, it's hostile territory, and he's a stranger in a strange land. He doesn't know how to mix in. He doesn't know how to play this game here, and so he's just going to not play.
And it's not going to end well for him. That's all I can say. So, with that, I want to thank everybody for listening. Please follow us on Twitter at MPU Podcast and on Facebook at facebook.com/MorePerfectUnion Podcast, and share our link on your Facebook timeline so your friends can discover us as well. And please take the More Perfect Union Podcast survey at our website, moreperfectunionpodcast.com, to give us valuable feedback on how we're doing and what you'd like to hear more of or hear less of on the podcast. And with that, everybody, thank you for a very passionate and spirited discussion tonight. We'll see you next week.
I think what they're going to want to hear less of on the survey is all of us bloviating.
No,
With the best of
Rebecca, my mom loves you. She likes you more than she likes me. Yeah.
There you go.